Yo, boys. Welcome back. What a hot, metaphorically and literal summer we've got right now. Pratik, you're my hot girl summer here. We got to talk about finally some noise from the January 6th committee that I think, and a lot of people out there think is worth listening to, paying attention to, maybe making some bets based on. I think we also had a bunch of primaries this week. So we got a lot to roll through before we get to Mr. Worldwide, Nick Ottens, later on in this podcast. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, sounds good.
I noticed that I've been in DC for the last week. It's literally the hottest place on the face of the earth, but your sense of style never changes. Nice little vineyard vine shirt. Do you just not sweat?
Yeah, not really. I mean, I actually find that they blast the air conditioning so much everywhere in DC. I kind of have to dress warm even on days like this.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have to change clothes like at least twice a day and do laundry like every 16 hours or something like that to keep up with how hot it is here.
I wonder if the temperature is part of why the pro-choice rallies have actually kind of been a dud. I mean, Republicans have been like champing at the bit, just waiting for them to riot or something. It just hasn't happened.
You know, I went down there and it was pretty tame after that Roe v. Wade ruling, or Dobbs, whatever it's called, came out. Just some bad haircuts, some sort of loud drums, and just like a lot of, middle and upper middle class Americans making their voices heard in like rainbow t-shirts. Very peaceful. Really can't indulge any right-wing muscles to talk trash about it. That was sort of my experience.
Yeah, I think so. Although, I mean, the expectation that they would riot in the first place was probably misplaced. Like, it's a bunch of cat ladies at the end of the day.
Cat ladies and allies. Anyone who identifies as an ally is probably not going to take a crowbar and break a window.
Yeah, there you go.
Allies do not break things. People who are out for justice break things.
Although it is worth noting that, with that said, Maxine Waters did not miss an opportunity to, provoke some, call for some violence.
Welcome to Los Angeles. Okay, all right, but we're not here to talk about Roe. We covered Roe a little bit on our last podcast. I'm sure it'll come up in some of these stories. So I've got two segments for us to rip through here. I've got January 6th committee copium. I think that we're seeing a lot of like Republicans trying to cope with the reality of just like how shit crazy and insane Trump actually was. And it's popping up around the map in these January 6th committee hearings. We need to talk about that lest we make some bad bets in the future. And I think we also need to play House Congressional District Roulette with this week's primaries. So are you cool? Are you feeling sporty here?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, let's see. Okay, so I'm just gonna like name three different things in the January 6th committee, and maybe you can tell me how the copium's flowing. Should we start with Liz Cheney?
Okay.
I think Liz Cheney is taking like euthanasia copium right now. Like she's just flying her kamikaze plane right into the SS Trump. And I think you were actually kind of prescient early on saying that she's just going to go down with the ship and maybe run for like president or some bigger office later in the future. But this is just like the legacy that she's going to take for now.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there are basically two ways to bet on Cheney. The most immediate way is her reelection bid. And the markets are giving her, about roughly a 10% chance. I've been shorting Cheney for some time, but I'm kind of taking the I Savage sell at 90 approach on this one. I was content to sell out once it hit 90, and I'm just kind of staying out. I don't think she's going to get reelected, but it is pretty hard to kind of think about what the impact will be of the January 6th commission on voters. And just given the fact that she's now openly targeting and calling for Democrats to come help her, I don't think it's going to be enough to put her over the top, but to eke out that last 10%, I think is too risky for me.
Yeah, I think we saw a little bit of that in Lauren Boebert's race in Colorado this past week, that there was sort of an unprecedentedly large number of Democrats or independents, I can't remember quite how it works there, voting against her in the primary, but ultimately it was just such a small number next to the more knuckle-dragging GOP base varietals. It just didn't really matter.
But yeah, I mean, I think Cheney, whatever the outcome of her reelection, I mean, I think she has absolutely exceeded expectations in her performance in the January 6th hearings. I mean, really just professional, top-notch performance. And so if she wants to do it, I think she would have a rationale to run in the Republican primaries in 2024, not because I think she'll win, but I think that she will be a credible voice in the party and represent a certain wing of the party.
She's definitely pulled off the like pain in the ass seventh grade math teacher act, where like at first she was really annoying and galling and like nails on chalkboardy, and you're like, why is this woman just like being so crazy? And then over the course of like days and days and weeks and tests, she's like the middle school math teacher that you like look up to, and you're like, oh, I'm glad that she was that way. And like I feel like that has been her character arc for the January 6th committee. So take your copium, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Can we talk about another a younger woman on the January 6th committee this past week? Do you know who I'm talking about?
Hutchinson?
Cassidy Hutchinson. You got a copium take here?
Well, I thought she was so I was very curious who the surprise witness would be, and when they announced it was her, I had kind of a mixed reaction because, I mean, she's very young. I don't think she's anyone's idea of a household name or anything, but she really delivered. I mean, not only in terms of her just performance and demeanor, but just more importantly, the substance that she brought to the table. And she was absolutely in Trump's very inner circle in the events of January 6th. And she really brought not only, I think, evidence that would be damning legally, but also she achieved what I think has been the big question, which is, could the January 6th deliver information that would really resonate in the news cycle? And the anecdotes about Trump reaching for the steering wheel and all that, I think absolutely did it.
I thought Cassidy Hutchinson is like, to like make a good movie, you need to have a character who the audience is like, oh yeah, like, Keanu Reeves is just like me. And I thought Cassidy Hutchinson was like that. Like, she is the journey that a lot of Republicans have been on, from like, oh, let's try this Trump guy, to, okay, he's eccentric, but at least he's actually, at least he's actually standing up to those Dems, or, whatever it may be. And then you could just see her in that hearing, like the story she was telling about like the indifference of, what was her boss, Mark Meadows, the chief of staff? Like just the complete and total indifference that people had to Trump's just absolute worst instincts and most kind of, like vile actions. Like you could just see the progression. And it makes me think that there's probably millions of conservatives like her who just are over it and aren't going back to Trump. And, maybe the polls haven't fully realized this yet, but there's just a lot of Cassidy Hutchinsons out there who got more than they wanted and don't want to do it again.
Yeah, I mean, so if you want to kind of see the cringe side of how Republicans are dealing with this, I would say definitely check out the House Judiciary Twitter account, which is managed by Jim Jordan and his staff. But what I found notable about that, among other things, they were trying to figure out a way to attack Cassidy Hutchinson. So what they found was they dug up an old news report showing that a few days after January 6th, there were reports that she wanted to go work for Trump in Mar-a-Lago, and they were kind of using that as evidence that, oh, if she was so outraged, why did she want to work for Trump after January 6th? But to me, that's actually the damning part of this, which is that she is not some never Trump person. She's not like, some establishment, whatever. She was absolutely part of the Trump situation, the Trump team. She stuck with him for very long. And the fact that even people like this now are bleeding from the Trump orbit and recognizing, whether out of conscience or just out of self-preservation, that this is a ship they want to jump off of, that is a very bad sign, in my view, for Trump and his prospects.
I think we've turned into a very visual society. We spend so much time looking at our phones and flipping through TikToks and Instagrams. And the visual storytelling of Cassidy Hutchinson was so strong. You didn't have to see a lot of it to get it. I mean, she was obviously just extremely nervous. She was obviously scared. Just looking at her, you could tell that she understood what she was doing and how it was going to change her life, probably not for the better. And I think that maybe more so, or as much as anything she said, will really kind of resonate with anyone who takes the time to consume any bit of that testimony, which, I've been happy to trash the January 6th committee for being really boring and backwards. I think that this last hearing was really something extraordinary in our history. And But I don't know, Pratik, you were kind of ahead on the betting angle of this to sort of, you've been saying for months that Trump's overpriced, that this is going to damage him, whittle away at his base of support. Is it time to stop buying shorts on Trump? Like, let it ride the other way?
Before we get into the betting, I did want to just respond to one point you made, which is important, about her life probably being worse off as a consequence of this testimony. I think this is a very important point, and I think it's valuable for betting, which is that it's when people sort of break from their boss, break from their team in Washington, and they write that memoir and they get press, I think often people discount the importance of this or the magnitude of it because they assume that it's driven by opportunism. But the reality is that in the vast majority of cases, when you break from your party, your boss, whatever, usually from a career perspective, the repercussions are negative just because you might get 48 hours of a good news cycle, but then all your allies and people who are part of your patronage network can never really trust you. And so I've always taken the approach that when someone takes a step like this, it's really worth taking seriously what they're saying because they're putting a lot on the line. In terms of the betting, I would actually say right now that I guess I'm of two minds on this. So I continue to think that even though the markets are finally reacting, I think Trump remains overpriced. I would say continue to short him. And my view is that I'm going to keep shorting Trump until the day he gets indicted, or the day
You're sure he will be?
I mean, I'm sure enough that okay, let me put it this way. I think that to me, there are a few different triggers on when to stop shorting him. I think one is an indictment. I think the other obviously is like some kind of a credible or reasonably credible report that he has made a decision not to run. But I think short of those two, I mean, I continue to think this is just going to kind of bleed and to keep shorting him. But I also think that even though Trump is in bad shape, I actually think partly as a consequence of the January 6th commission and then partly as a consequence of abortion, Republicans actually are kind of on a discount right now. So I would say, like, definitely if you're not already maxed out, move in and try to get as many shares as you can on Republicans winning the House back. You can now get that in the mid 80s. I think that's way too
That's a
low.
good deal.
And then
that
both
should be in the
terms
mid 99s.
Yeah, and then I mean, like, both in terms of overall Senate control, and then also some of these more like long shot Republican Senate seats, notably like Colorado, which we'll talk about. I think now is a good time to buy Republicans while they're in a bad news cycle.
Well, do you think that there's a little bit of a mismatch in the Republican field though? Because it's like this whole primary season has been about trying to win Trump's support, or to at least feign enough enthusiasm to not get a de-endorsement from him. And maybe we might be headed into an election where people are just officially over Trump, and you have like the gender divide even more salient with the abortion issue being back. Like that the Republicans have just kind of built the wrong army for yesterday's war going into this election.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think establishment kind of incumbent Republican types are always a lagging indicator. They're always, for the most part, a little bit behind. I mean, I continue to think that a Trump endorsement is very important, but I think that it was inevitable that the importance of that just would diminish as we transition from primaries to the general election, right? I mean, like an impact of a Trump endorsement is obviously felt most strongly within Republican divides. But I think it's telling. Like, I thought it was very significant right after Joe O'Dea in Colorado won his primary for the Senate. I don't know if you saw, he issued a statement right away saying that he intends to be a Joe Manchin figure in the Senate. Right?
So good hair, like lots of guns, houseboat. Do they have lakes in Colorado for houseboats?
Well, what he said specifically is that no party will own him. He will be independent. That sort of thing.
So he's going to be a moderate?
It sounds like even more than a moderate, someone who's just going to defy party orthodoxy. And that is certainly a telling kind of strategy. I mean, there are a lot of different ways you can run a statewide campaign in Colorado. So
he should just start wearing like V-neck T-shirts like Kirsten Sinema then. Like, I feel like that communicates to voters pretty quickly what you're about.
You're the fashion guy on the show.
Well, you touched on the one other piece of copium I wanted to go to, which was the House Judiciary Committee. I don't know how much more there's to say about it, but it's like super cringy. I sort of feel like their tweets and the tweets of members they've been retweeting, they're kind of like Snapchat messages that I imagine like 14-year-olds cyberbullying each other with, except they're about Cassidy Hutchinson. It's very bizarre. I can't believe it's like an official account. I don't really know what to make of it.
Well, there was one tweet in particular that I thought was very telling. So here, let me pull it up. So, okay, basically there was a tweet from, give me one sec here.
It's literally all hearsay evidence. What a joke. That's an official tweet from the House Judiciary Committee.
Yeah, well, okay, here's the one. So Jerry Nadler tweeted, I understand the select committee is still seeking testimony from Jim Jordan if the ranking member cares to contradict any of the testimony he heard today. So then the House Judiciary Committee did a quote tweet of that, and they wrote, quote, do you think men can get pregnant and have abortions at Rep. Jerry Nadler? And so, I mean, this is, on the one hand, I mean, it's just total craziness that like a group of lawyers, presumably on the House Judiciary Committee, are tweeting this. On the other hand, I think
how do you know it's not Jim Jordan just like pumping iron in the House, like the House weight room, just texting in between sets?
Could be that. I mean, it's from the official account,
right?
Which is what makes it notable. But then the other thing is like, I actually think that is probably kind of the conversation that like MAGA Republicans are having, right? And what it shows is that there actually is no real defense of Trump anymore. I mean, you can't, we're sort of beyond that point. I think the question simply is like, how the only card it seems like they have to play is culture war kind of issues that are totally irrelevant to this issue. And the question just is how triggered Republicans
but
are.
I think it is relevant to the issue. You were just saying why Republicans are on sale right now in this news cycle. And I think it's just because there's so many millions of people who are collectively rolling their eyes at President Biden and Democratic leadership that's taken so much time to, refer to women as pregnant persons or menstruating people, and taken so much time to say that inflation's made up and high gas prices are actually great because they're good for the environment and bad for Russia, or all this just gobbledygook that they say while they do this stupid culture war stuff. I think it kind of sells. Like, I think the Judiciary Committee is doing it because it sells.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I think that my view kind of early in the cycle was that the midterms did not have to be a total bloodbath for Democrats, that they had a way to kind of pull it together. But even though Republicans are in disarray, they're in bad shape, I have very little confidence in Biden and the Democrats kind of pulling it together enough to save their congressional majorities. But I do think this is bad news for Trump, even though the Republican Party writ large is in decent shape.
Okay, so you wanted to, before we go to House District Roulette, you wanted to talk about the New York State Republican parties dosing their little bit of copium, their little bit of denial. Do you want to tell the boys your trade there?
Yeah, I mean, look, so most of my bets from last night were in the New York races, and one that I had been following carefully was the Republican gubernatorial primary between Congressman Lee Zeldin and Andrew Giuliani, Rudy Giuliani's son. And I think this ties into the copium narrative because maybe like a week or two before the election, the New York Republican Party ended up endorsing Andrew Giuliani, even though Zeldin, by all accounts, was the favorite. And what was notable to me is that they did it literally right in the peak of the news cycle, where Rudy Giuliani is kind of a inadvertent star of the January 6th hearings. And so, you can say, well, all right, Andrew Giuliani shouldn't be responsible for his dad's alleged criminality, except that the only reason he has any kind of a role in the Republican Party in New York is because of his father's legacy. So it kind of just goes to show that I think the Republican establishment infrastructure is not ready to move on from Trump, even when the rest of the party is.
I think that they just have a general challenge right now of like they just don't know what to do. Like they don't know if they're supposed to be like, waxing Trump's poll, or they don't know if they're supposed to be moving on. And so they just keep doing these kind of like dumb, like non-genuine type things. And we're left to just sort of chew it over on this podcast and figure out how we can bet on it in the future.
Yeah, I mean, we'll cover it on a future pod, but I'll just kind of dangle for now that I actually think this is a good lotto to buy the Republicans in the New York gubernatorial election if you can get that at like
I thought
4 or 5%.
I thought Kathy Hochul was your girl.
Well, I thought she was very underpriced in the Democratic primary, but I think now moving into the general election, if we're seeing a wave Republican year, I could see this one actually being a close race.
Yeah, we're gonna have to get to that. Okay, but for the purposes of this segment, I think it's time to play House District Roulette. So we had New York, Mississippi, Colorado, Illinois. Maybe we had some other primaries. I'm not aware of it if we did, but I'm also kind of a dumbass, and it was my birthday, and I was cranking Modelo's. I'm just gonna go state by state, and why don't you just tell me your story from each state, and I'll tell you mine, and hopefully you aren't gonna steal my thunder, and I will not steal yours. So let's start. Why don't we start in Illinois? Illinois House primaries last night. What drum are you banging there?
Okay, so I guess there were two things that I'm thinking of. One was that Representative Mary Miller, who was the Trump-backed nominee, did end up winning in the new Illinois district.
She's the one who looks like a Lenny Riefenstahl movie, right?
I actually don't even know what that is.
Oh, a famous German filmmaker who was very cozy with the Nazis.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Oh yeah, she was the sorry, the Victory for White Life women.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should explain that one. I think probably people won't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's been spammy in the news. My understanding is that she gave a like, thank God abortion's illegal speech. And I sort of take her at her word when she maybe meant to say a victory for the right to life, but she said a victory for white life or something like that. Is that the story?
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know. Are we giving her like an honest mistake card there? Or are we saying?
Well, so I mean, she said it while introducing Trump at a rally, and she's. I mean, not that this should matter, but it probably does for the optics. She's just like a very middle-aged blonde white woman.
Truly.
With like
she was at like Snow White's wedding reception, basically.
Yeah. She has like kind of the dumb, mid-wit IQ demeanor type of deal. So
that's most people in the House.
Yeah. Anyway, but she ended up winning, so I think that's at least evidence that a Trump endorsement still matters. The other one that I found interesting was I wasn't really betting on this one too much, but on the Democratic side, in that House district that was open from Bobby Rush. Yeah.
Bobby Rush, the last politician to beat Barack Obama in I think it was the 2001 Democratic primary in that district, sent Obama packing.
Yeah, exactly. So Bobby Rush retired, and so there were 17 candidates, some of whom were pretty good, vying for that seat, and it was a very open race. There was a lot of money to be made there if you had a strong thesis. But Jonathan Jackson, who is Jesse Jackson's son, ended up winning that one. Which I found to be pretty interesting. I'm sure, maybe we could have iSavage or someone do a deeper dive into that. But I always just think it's notable when like notable families and notable figures in politics are able to continue.
Well, I mean, isn't this more and more just a story we see as like very crowded primaries from the presidential field of 16, 17, 20, the last couple cycles, like all the way down. You just get these crowded primaries. And like, really, the lesson is think like an Instagram wannabe and just fuck for clout, because whoever has name ID is just going to win in these crowded fields. And lo and behold, Jesse Jackson's son, right?
Yeah, and I think my understanding is this is not the first Jackson son who's actually done well in politics. I think there's at least one other guy who's done well. So I don't know, maybe a family dynasty in the making, even though one would think they'd be on their way out.
Okay, so in Illinois, my House district roulette, I'm actually going to go up to the North Shore of Chicago. Sean Casten beating, I can't even remember her name, maybe Mary Newman or something, winning a contested Democratic primary for the wealthy suburbs of Chicago. I think this one really shows you like sometimes change is slow to come in America, but when it happens, it can happen like very quickly and abruptly. This was Peter Roskam's old district. It was a solid red, Republican suburban district. Sean Casten ran as a total prick lefty, and it seems like he's got that district on lock now. I don't think Sean Casten's going anywhere. I think it's just a story of change is slow coming, but like once it comes hard and it comes fast. So that's all I have to say about that. But if you want to chew on it, you're welcome to.
Yeah, no, that was a good one. I had actually thrown some money in there, and but yeah, I no more commentary beyond that.
All right, you want to go to let's go down south. Let's go. You know what? We'll just be like a blues band. We're going to go from Chicago straight down to Mississippi. So Mississippi primaries. Maybe I'll start this time. You cool with that?
Yeah.
The big story here, if you could even know another story in Mississippi, congratulations. Maybe we'll both be on this one. Fighter pilot party officially shut out. Michael Guest, the kind of anti-Trump or, Trump at arm's length incumbent, held on against, what was that guy's name? Like Rooster or Hangman or Iceman or Maverick? Or what was that dude's name? Cassidy. Yeah. Fighter pilot party. Trump primary defeated. Incumbent retains power. Very bad year. Very, very bad year for the fighter pilot party, which we love to admire here on Star Spike with Gamblers.
Yeah, I threw some money behind Guest there, and I think maybe just a general lesson that this illustrates is that often I think on predicted and so forth, there's a general tendency just not to appreciate or realize how powerful of an advantage incumbency is. And so obviously that's not a hard rule. I mean, if there is an incumbent with major scandals and so forth, as we saw in the Palazzo race, I mean, certainly that can be a problem. But generally speaking, I mean, when you don't have major scandals or anything, I think it's a pretty safe bet when you're in doubt to just throw some money behind the incumbent. I think that's a long-term winner.
This is the problem. Like one of the things you can learn betting is that there's certain rules and certain trends you can bet on, but sometimes they get you in trouble too. Like, a lot of people lost a lot of money last week because they thought, no, Republicans will never vote for an anti-gun bill. But, if you paid attention, you'd see that, that ironclad rule wasn't going to work. And I think the Trump endorsement is one that people are having a lot of time, wrestling with, like incumbency versus Trump endorsement. And it seems like maybe people are still overpricing the big man's blessing.
Yeah, either that, or I would argue just underestimating the power of incumbency.
Yeah. Just got having trouble balancing the scales. Okay, Colorado, we had an extensive podcast about it. I got at least one bettable insight out of that, which was that Eric Odland, that kind of more blue collar, veteran, right wingy guy reading Dr. Seuss books that were canceled to his kids in his ads, that he was the man to win. He did, in fact, beat the self-funding rich guy, Tim Reichert. I think that's a good trade to make whenever you get the chance, the kind of blue collar middle class vibe versus the rich guy funding his own campaign. I think that is a rule or a trend to bet on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot to say beyond what I've said about Joe O'Dea. I will just note that the market for who will win the Senate election, like the general election market, the Republicans did get a bounce. I still think that Republicans are underpriced here. So I would continue to say, buy around 20-21% the Republican. I think that's going to continue to be competitive.
Okay, well, we'll watch this space. Do you have anything in New York? I don't have anything in New York, and you just gave us a lot.
Well, the other market that I was betting on, in addition to the Republican governor, was actually the Democratic lieutenant governor race. Now, the reason why that's interesting is, so there's this woman in New York. She's somewhat of a perennial candidate representing the progressive side of the party, Anna Maria Archila. Now, the reason I had heard of her in the first place actually is because I don't know if you remember when the whole Brett Kavanaugh hearing was happening and those two women bombarded Jeff Flake in the elevator.
Was she one of them?
Yeah, so she was one of them. So I always just assumed that she got a bunch of press at that time.
Like that was her 15 minutes of fame, was accosting Jeff Flake.
Yeah, exactly. But I didn't realize that actually, in addition to being something of a professional activist, she's actually just someone who is reasonably well connected in New York and keeps running. And so every time she runs for office, it's up against a Democratic, more establishment, moderate kind of a person. And then these like Bernie, whoever on predicted, just keep throwing money behind her. So I just shorted her, got her at a pretty good price, and made some money off of her.
I feel like you're developing a subspecialty in like New York Democratic primaries. And I'm actually very offended that you aren't like sharing these picks instantly on Twitter or like a distribution list, because I don't know that you've missed on one of these this year.
Yeah, well, we should have Mark Davis on and cover these. They're actually well, now that you brought it up, I mean, I'll just say we'll do another pot, but there are some very interesting races in New York right now. I would definitely check out New York 10, which is very competitive. It has a bunch of interesting candidates. We can talk about it later.
Yeah.
New York 17, another one of these dynamics with a progressive versus establishment. And then, as we talked about, Jerry Nadler is up for election, a very tough election bid in New York 12. So we should definitely cover.
That's like a boomer cage match between him and Carolyn Maloney, right?
Yeah, and there's also a very interesting candidate, a young guy, young Indian American guy, Obama vet, who is, I don't think he's going to win, but he's someone to look out for.
What's his name?
Suraj Patel.
Suraj Patel. Okay.
He's a Stanford alum. Anyway, we can do another pod on that.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, let's go. It's been sort of a hot week overseas too. I feel like the Ukraine war beat's been hitting. So I think it's a good time to go talk to our friend Nick about the situation in Europe, right?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, let's blaze.